Doing it in the dark, the great divorce phenomenon, and a global framework gap. Hello, I'm Lisa Keevill. I'm the founder of Recreate and Rise. I'm the creator of the Recreate and Rise framework and the founder of the Great Divorce Project. I'm also a woman who experienced the end of a 30-year marriage in my early 50s, and that lived experience is where this work began. I did not set out to create a framework. I did not set out to write a white paper. I set out to survive. When my marriage ended, I found myself no longer standing in a life that I no longer recognized. There were lawyers who could explain the legal process and divide my assets. There were people who could offer comfort, and there were therapists who could help process my grief. And all of those forms of support were valuable. But nobody could help me answer the question that sat underneath everything else. Who am I now? Not simply who am I as a divorced woman, not who am I as a single woman, but who am I as a woman? When my life and the future that I had built over 30 years no longer existed. Who was I before I became someone's wife? And what parts of me had I set aside during my marriage? I guess what still belonged to me, and what did I want from the decades of life that were possibly still ahead of me? And those questions, they had no obvious home. There was no map. There was no structured pathway that could help me move from the woman that I was to the woman I should be. There was no time frames, no future, nothing. I was quite literally navigating this in the dark. Years later, after building Recreate and Rise and working with women navigating the end of long-term relationships, I began to understand something that I could not fully explain at the start. The greatest disruption of a grey divorce is not only the loss of the relationship, it's the fracture of identity. It's the fracture of identity. With that realization became the foundation of this white paper. Its title is Doing It in the Dark, the Grey Divorce Phenomenon and the Global Framework Gap. This paper brings together demographic evidence, academic research, Australian government and institutional evidence, and the lived experience, including my own, of women navigating or that have navigated a grey divorce. But importantly, the white paper doesn't just simply describe the problem. It asks why such a significant life transition has been allowed to remain without a coordinated response. And it also covers what needs to change. So what is grey divorce? The term grey divorce generally refers to divorce or separation involving adults aged 50 years and older. Sometimes people hear that term and they imagine that it describes a small or an unusual group. It does not. Grey divorce is now one of the most significant late life demographic transitions that is occurring across Western nations. And whilst overall divorce rates in many countries, they have declined, stabilised, or attracted less public attention, divorce among older adults has moved in the opposite direction. In Australia, approximately 1 in 3 divorce now involves at least one person over the age of 50. And research is showing continued growth amongst people aged 65 and older. 65 and older. Imagine getting divorced at that age. and happy to recreate a new chapter. This means we're not talking about a niche social trend. We're talking about a rapidly growing cohort of people having to reconstruct their lives at a stage when they're navigating aging, changing health, caring responsibilities, retirement, career transitions, and financial uncertainty. It's believed there's several reasons behind the rise. People are living longer. Women have greater financial independence than previous generations. And a lot of the social stigma surrounding divorce has reduced. So expectations of marriage have changed. And for many people reaching their 50s, 60s, or 70s, they're actually asking if they're willing to spend another, say, 20 to 30 years with someone that is perhaps on a different path as them, or perhaps they just don't love them like they used to, or perhaps the relationship just doesn't bring to them what the relationship once did. But whilst the reasons for greater divorce are increasingly discussed, the consequences are still poorly understood, and the response remains fragmented. Why greater divorce is different? All divorce can be painful. This white paper is not suggesting that divorce earlier in life is easy or insignificant. The greater divorce has particular characteristics that require a more specialised response. And this white paper does refer to women. It doesn't mean that men are not important. This paper particularly refers to women. When a woman has spent 20, 30, or 40 years inside a marriage, she's simply not just shared a house with another person. The one has shared routines, friendships, family traditions, social networks, financial decisions, hopes, plans, roles, and responsibilities. Her story may have been built around the word we. We bought the house. We raised the children. We may have built the business. We moved to the town. We planned to retire. We're going to travel too. We would grow old together. And then suddenly, or it is quite often suddenly, there's normally not a runway up to it. Suddenly we becomes I. The future that once seemed certain disappears. The relationship ends, but so does the expected retirement. The shared friendship groups usually change. Relationships with adult children, they're either strained or complicated, or there's a change that takes a long time to actually resolve or to create a new relationship. The family home usually is sold. Financial plans collapse. Daily routines disappear. And the woman is not only grieving a person, the woman unknowingly is grieving an identity, a social position, a lifestyle, a family unit, and that imagined future. This is what the white paper calls the identity fracture. It's the crisis beneath the crisis. And it's important to say that this identity investment is not a weakness. It's not evidence that a woman failed to be independent. It's a natural consequence of a long-term human attachment. When two lives have been deeply woven together over decades, separating them affects far more than a legal relationship status. It affects the architecture of the self. The absence of the horizon. There's another element of greater divorce that I believe is frequently overlooked. It's what I describe in the paper, but it's the absence of a horizon. For many major life transitions, we have some idea of what comes next. Doesn't matter, regardless of the age, a person leaving school can picture future education or employment. A person changing careers can imagine a different role. And a person retiring may have spent many years planning what their retirement will look like and feel like. And even when these transitions are difficult, it's usually a recognized destination. Great divorce often removes the destination entirely. A woman may not know where she will live. She may not know where she can afford to retire. She doesn't know who her friends are because she may lose many of them. She may not know whether she will want another relationship. And she may not even know what her role now is with her children, that her marriage has ended. She may look ahead and see no clear picture of the future. The absence of a horizon can cause paralysis, a form of paralysis, because you can't move, because you don't know where you're going. When we cannot imagine a future, it becomes extremely difficult to make the decisions required to move towards one. And that's why simply telling a woman to move on or start again or enjoy your freedom or you will be okay is simply not enough. Before a woman can build a new life, she needs help recovering the coherent sense of herself. Consequences. The consequences of a great divorce, they're significant and they're interconnected. Financially, women can experience a substantial decline in their standard of living. Assets accumulated over decades must suddenly support two households rather than just one. Many women have a lower superannuation balance because of time spent caring for children or supporting a partner's career. They may need to enter the workforce, increase their working hours, or may remain employed for longer than they had planned. Housing can become unstable. The known home no longer is there. Some women do have to sell the family home, and a lot of them find it they have to move to another area purely because of the cost in the area that they've been in for many years has escalated. This is one thing in Australia, the cost of living in a suburb has risen dramatically. Others move away from established communities or support networks because of this cost. Health may be affected. Stress, disrupted sleep, reduced exercise, poor nutrition, and social isolation can compound existing health concerns. Social networks may fracture because friendships shared, a lot of friendships that were shared with the former partner. And some people feel pressured to take sides. And some friends, they just simply disappear because they don't know what to say, don't know how to react, and they don't know what to ask. So it's easier on them if they just disappear. The woman may also experience loneliness at a very point in life where maintaining strong social connections is increasingly important. And these issues are often treated as two separate problems. You have financial advice over here, you have housing advice here, counselling here, social groups are somewhere else again. But the white paper argues that these problems are all connected, or the mechanism connecting them, I should say, is the identity disruption. When a woman no longer has a clear sense of who she is, decision-making does become harder. Your confidence declines, social reconnection becomes more difficult, planning for the future becomes all impossible. There's a loss of courage of where are you going. So there are so many factors that identity impacts, and it is why identity is not an optional or a soft part of recovery. Identity is a foundation that supports every other part. And as mentioned earlier, the white paper is different. It's not reflective that the man does not go through issues beyond a grey divorce. A man goes through a different structure to rebuilding to a woman. And a woman going through a grey divorce, it comes at a time, it's like triple convergence. For women, grey divorce can occur at the intersections of three profound transitions. The first being the divorce, the end of a long-term relationship. The second is a broader midlife identity transition. A lot of women, they do experience menopause during this time. Menopause is known to impact the woman in many different aspects of her life. A woman also may be experiencing empty nesting at this stage of life, and it is documented that a woman experiences empty nesting in a significantly impacted more than the man. This normally relates to the role that she's played in the children's life. It's also known that women, they may be caring for aging parents at this age, and as well may be facing ageism in the current workplace. On the same time of all of these happening, the one thing in her life that she thought was always a known was the marriage and the envisaged future. It's come to an end. A convergence helps explain why the impact can be so destabilizing. So it's not just one transition, it can be several transitions arriving at once. And whilst the white paper discusses a triple convergence, as I've just mentioned, there's many different layers that will arrive at a woman's life around the age of 50 plus. Yet the woman is frequently expected to navigate all of these changes independently, piecing together her own bits of support and somehow emerge with a new life plan. That is an unreasonable expectation on a woman. The framework gap. This brings us to one of the central arguments of the white paper. Australia has recognised that major identity shifting transitions require structured support. When members of the Australian Defence Force leave the military service, they're provided with transition support, seminars, guidance, and dedicated services. The identity shift involved in leaving service is acknowledged. When police officers leave policing, programs such as More Than a Cop recognise that a person may struggle to separate their individual identity from their professional identity. Late career and retirement research also identifies the loss of identity, routine, relationships, and purpose as serious transition challenges. So frameworks are in place to assist with this. So Australia has invested in research, tools, structured pathways to help people navigate these changes. And I agree, it's appropriate. But when a woman no longer is part of a marriage of 20, 30 or 40 years, there's no equivalent coordinated transition infrastructure. There's no nationally recognised grey divorce pathway. There's no standard identity reconstruction model that I could find. There's no coordinated system that links all of these together that assists the woman once she's found her identity of who she is. Nothing links everything. They're all just kind of left for her to find them and grab out and say, I've got it. So grey divorce sits between systems. As far as I can see from my research, it's not considered a clinical diagnosis, so it doesn't belong in the health system. It's not considered a workplace transition, nor solely a financial issue, solely an aging issue, or a legal matter. So every system addresses one fragment, while no system accepts responsibility for the whole transition. That is the global framework gap. The great divorce is a transition dispersed across multiple systems, but claimed by none. So what currently exists and why it's not enough. The white paper recognises that valuable support already exists, and I recognise it as well. So this white paper is not an argument against lawyers, counsellors, financial advisors, coaches, or community groups, as each group plays a significant and important role. But individually, they do not form a complete transition pathway. Legal services are focused on the process of ending the marriage and dividing assets. But normally as the woman walks out of a lawyer's office with the settlement, she still does not know how she wants to live. Therapy and counselling are spoken too much. They are enormously valuable for processing their grief, trauma, anxiety, and emotional distress. And I've used the services myself. My 30-year marriage ended. But therapy, it doesn't always provide a structured pathway towards identity reconstruction, reinvention, or future direction. Peer support communities reduce isolation and they help women realise they are not alone. The community without a clear mythology can provide comfort and support, but not necessarily providing direction. General divorce coaching often focuses on navigating the divorce process itself, the conflict, the communication, court, the children, or the co-parenting. And again, that important work is needed. But the identity and reinvention challenges of a woman leaving a long-term marriage at 50, 60, or 70, they're quite distinct. So what is missing is not support in the broadest sense. What is missing is coordination. What is missing is a structured, staged, and identity-centered pathway that helps a woman move from disruption towards reconstruction. The Recreate and Rise framework was developed to provide that pathway. The Recreate and Rise framework is built around 4 pillars: reclaim, inspire, strengthen, and emerge. Reclaim is about reconnecting with the woman beneath the roles that she is carrying. It helps her identify what is still her values, the strengths, the voice, the preferences, her abilities, and her identity. Inspire is about helping her imagine the possibility again, because when the future she expected disappears, she needs support to create and to see that new horizon. The strengthen is about building the internal and practical foundations required for the future: confidence, boundaries, decision-making, social connection, resilience, and personal agency. And emerge is about stepping into the next chapter, not as a diminished version of who she was, but a woman who has integrated all of her experiences and reclaimed authorship of her life, and she's able to move forward with purpose. The framework's not a clinical treatment. It does not replace legal, psychological, or financial advice. It creates the connective pathways around services. It gives the woman a map, and its central principle is simply identity first, everything else follows. So why this white paper matters? This white paper matters because language creates recognition. When a problem has no name, women often assume that the problem is personal. They believe they are failing. They tell themselves they should be coping better. They wonder why they still feel lost when the legal process is over. They may have a financial settlement. They may have moved house. They may even have supportive people around them. But internally, they still don't know who they are. Naming the identity fracture helps women understand that her experience is not evidence of weakness. It's a predictable response to the dismantling of a deeply established life structure. The paper also matters because grey divorce has often been framed as a private relationship matter. But when a transition affects women's housing, financial security, health, workforce participation, retirement prospects, and social connection, it's no longer private. It becomes a social, economic, and public health concern. Employers should care because women aged 50 to 65 are among the most experienced members of the workforce. Superannuation funds should care because women may be approaching retirement. At the moment, their financial arrangements are fundamentally altered. Healthcare providers should care because social isolation creates stress, instability, and affect long-term well-being. And policymakers should care because the number of women experience this transition. If you look at the incoming data and the growth of the aging of the baby boomers and Generation X, it looks like this transition is going to continue to grow. And researchers should care because we still need more detailed evidence of the long-term experience of women following grey divorce. And if I can just touch on the researchers, if you've made it this far into my speaking about the grey divorce, I would like to thank you, sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this research, because not many people are tackling this extremely important subject. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for the research that you've done, because it's allowed me to have confirmation that the gap that I saw existed does have a huge requirement and a huge impact to the people that need it most. So please keep doing your research. It is significant and I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, as will the millions of women around the world that may get use from the Recreate and Rise framework as it's brought to life. So why this moment is important. This is not a problem that is going to disappear. Baby boomers are continuing to age. Gen X is moving into the age range associated with grey divorce, if they're not already there. People are living longer. Women are increasingly unwilling to remain indefinitely in relationships that no longer meet their emotional, psychological, or relation needs. A woman divorcing at 60 may have another 25 or 30 years of life ahead of her. That's not an ending to be quietly endured. This is a significant portion of a human life. The question is not simply how she survives the divorce. The question is how she lives those next decades. Does she enter them financially depleted, socially isolated, and disconnected from herself? Or does she receive the support needed to reclaim her identity, rebuild her foundations, and create a meaningful future? The systems and standards developed now will shape thousands, and eventually the mission is to help millions of women experience this life transition. And that is why this moment matters. The call to action. This paper calls for more coordinated response. It calls for further national and international research. It calls for grey divorce to be included in healthcare conversations, clinical referral pathways, and employee assistance programs. It calls for employers to recognise the workforce impact, superannuation funds and financial institutions to consider the specific vulnerability of women divorcing later in life. Because for community-based practitioner-led pathways that extend beyond crisis support, it calls for greater collaboration between researchers, policymakers, healthcare professionals, financial professionals, employers, and organisations already working directly with women in this age group. The goal is not to medicalise divorce. It's not to suggest that every woman is broken or traumatised, and it's not to remove a woman's agency. The goal is to ensure that women are not left to navigate one of life's most significant transitions without structure, language, or direction. So behind every statistic in the white paper is a woman. She's simply not a demographic. She's not divorce data. She's not a case study. She's someone who built a life around a partnership that no longer exists. She may be grieving. She may be frightened, financially or certain. She may also be relieved. She may feel possibility beginning to return. But often she feels a sense of several of those things all at the same time. But most importantly, she still has a future. The end of a long marriage should not mean the disappearance of the woman who lived inside it. It becomes the point at which she begins to reclaim herself. And that is why I wrote Doing It in the Dark, to make the invisible visible, to name the crisis beneath the crisis, and to challenge the absence of coordinated response, and to make the case that women navigating grey divorce deserve more than scattered services. Women need a map, a clear, documented map. The Recreate and Rise framework exists to begin providing that map, and the Grey Divorce Project exists to build the wider research, recognition, partnerships, and infrastructure that this transition requires, because no woman should reach the end of 20, 30, or a 40-year marriage and be left to ask, alone in the dark, who am I now? She deserves support to answer that question, and she deserves the opportunity to discover not only who she is now, but who she is still capable of becoming. I am Lisa Keevill. I am the founder of the Recreate and Rise framework, and I thank you so much for your time taken to listen to this video and also to read the white paper. I would love to connect with you further and talk more on the white paper. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and from all the women navigating grey divorce, say thank you as well.